Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of GTM and the Tofu Bowl. Today, I'm joined by Brendan Hufford. I'm super pumped to talk to him. He's the founder of Growth Sprints, All In, Growing Up newsletter. You're doing a lot of stuff. So welcome, Brendan.
Thanks. I appreciate that intro. I do chronically do a lot of things. Funny enough, like less now than what I used to do, but still a lot. I can't help it.
I suffer from the same thing. I'm always doing 16 side projects. I think starting Tofu was the first thing that made me really focus that, and having two small children, that also helps.
Yeah, I have a no new shoes policy where it's like I can't start more than one new thing per year. And that's been a nice forcing function to slow down a little bit, you know?
I have a random question for you. I was looking at all of your different businesses, and they have very unique logos. And they're kind of fun and whimsical. And the names aren't anything super crazy. So I was wondering, where did the logos come from?
So I have the privilege. I got introduced years ago to this wonderful designer. His name's Jim Viola. He runs a little kind of shop called Damn Good Brand. And I got hooked up with him. I had a project called SEO for the Rest of Us years and years ago. And he did all of the design and everything for that. So when I went to launch Growth Sprints and I had these other ideas for different things, he and I worked together. And we've kind of gone in phases. I have logos for podcasts I haven't launched yet, and all these other projects that I'm not launching on purpose. But we just wanted to feel like they went together, and it is very much my design sense. I love old school, kind of like thick lines, give me a good Cooper type face and everything. But everything kind of feels like it's in the same family, and that's super important to me.
I really like them. They've jumped out at me. It's kind of like certain companies have that. Like Gong was really good about having a kind of
Yeah.
crazy out there brand. And I felt like very similar when I saw yours.
So I think it's one of those things. Like, I worked at a design agency for 3+ years, and it really gave me an appreciation for how much design matters on things and how much it elevates what you're already doing. Cause I'm very much I came up and move fast and break things type of stuff. Like, I have typos. People still message me. They're like, there's typos on your homepage. And I'm like, I don't know. I looked at my bank account. It doesn't seem to matter. Like, I just go fast to my own detriment. But because the pendulum is all the way on that side of it, I need something that elevates that. And he's designed my sales decks and all sorts of things for me. We've even kind of toyed around with a full website redesign that looks more on brand. But yeah, Jim Viola is the best. I give him as much credit as I possibly can.
I'm a big fan as well. We're very much of the same mindset of move fast. We do a product release 6 nights a week. And I was on a panel last week and somebody was asking about, how do you know when it's good enough? We're like, it doesn't matter. Just ship it. That's the only way to get feedback. Like, just do
Mm-hmm.
stuff and figure out how to tweak and then iterate really quickly.
Yep, absolutely. I've also, and this is something I've had to rein myself back on, but I very much like took a volume approach to everything, very much like a be so good they can't ignore you Cal Newport type of thing, of just a large body of work that is all pretty high quality. And that was very much what made my early career. I just put out a lot of, so SEO for the Rest of Us started as a project called 100 Days of SEO. And I would recommend anybody who wants to make a defensible career, build a moat for yourself in your career. I put out and I don't recommend everybody do this because it was too much in retrospect, but I made a blog post, a podcast episode, and a YouTube video every weekday for 20 weeks. And that full body of work, I got sponsors. It gave me an excuse to interview people. People were excited because it was an ongoing project. We're on day 40 and people wanted to follow along. That very much made my career. I got job offers because of it and all these sorts of things. But it was also a good forcing function of let's just make a large body of work. The problem is, again, I push back on that now, especially with tech companies and SaaS companies, which is primarily who I work with, of don't do checkbox marketing. Don't do your volume approach. It worked for HubSpot back in the day when there was less information, but I call it the content cold war, where we're just in this arms race to produce as much content as possible. That it doesn't work anymore.
Well, and I think AI is exacerbating that. Now it's people feel like they can just churn out anything by just putting in a prompt into one of these ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and ooh, we have 27 blog posts. And I think that volume is making it so that it's really noisy and it's really hard to find signal. I also think people are getting lazy. I'm curious whether you're seeing the same thing, is like people are just getting lazy and not trying to be as creative as they used to be.
So I see a lot, like working with clients and especially doing sprints the way that I do sprints. I work with a lot more clients than probably most people would because I'm only working with them for 3 to 4 months at a time. So I see a lot more. And I kind of see two things. Like I still see a lot of people, and I don't mean this to be disparaging, but they're still kind of in their own little silo, doing their thing, not really trying to be creative, just pushing back on any sort of creative stuff. They just don't want to do anything. Those people exist. Like everybody watching this, listening to this has run into those humans who are just doing anything they can not to do work. There's also people like that are super creative and I applaud them. The problem is when you do something super creative, the example I use is like Notion did a big campaign that I was a part of. We all changed our profile pictures. It was super fun. Snoop did it. It was really cool, but I feel like there's all these people like championing like be super creative, and then Notion's like, all right, we're gonna be super creative, and everybody's like, not like that. What do you want? Like they tried to do something fun, but I do
What
think
went
there
wrong with that
is,
campaign?
huh?
What went wrong with that campaign, in your opinion?
I don't think anything went wrong. I think it did what it was supposed to do. Like it was just brand and brand awareness, and a lot of people talk about it and they felt a way, but it wasn't polarizing enough that anybody got mad. Like nobody felt betrayed or lied to or anything. It's not like we said we were going to give away a Tesla and then never did or anything like that. So sorry, said I could be a little spicy.
Please.
It's stuff like that where it's just like, sometimes that stuff happens and it's like people feel a little let down that it never, the promise was made and then not fulfilled. I don't think anything went wrong with it. I think people just misunderstood. You had two camps. People are like, this is dumb. I don't get it because they don't understand brand marketing. And another group of people that are like, this is dumb because it didn't make me want to buy Notion. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like maybe
Not the
that wasn't
goal.
the point. Like that's not all marketing. I think because we've had the technology, these promises have been made by like attribution software and stuff of like, you can connect everything to revenue. Everything that you see, hear, touch, listen to, watch, we can connect it to revenue. And in a lot of ways, like that's not true. Like this conversation today could lead to a client for me in a year and a half. How am I supposed to connect that? Like, I think stuff like that, sometimes we just need to like chill out a little bit, especially in my world of content where I have like two motions. Like I have stuff I want to connect to revenue and stuff that I don't. And I'm not worried about, like people ask me like, how many website visitors you get? I don't know. Like I would look if something was wrong. Like if I wasn't getting leads for 3 months, I'd be like, is my website broken? Is anybody going to my website? Like what's going on? But I think sometimes we just like get really excited. I used to have somebody at my old company that I worked at when I was in-house who would like track the bounce rate on the website every week. Why? What are we supposed to do with that? What do we do?
Data.
It's up this week. Why? What's the move? Like just people just tracking metrics to track metrics. So to answer bring it full circle, I don't know that anything went wrong with the campaign. I just think people have different views of what marketing is and how it should work, which I think is fine. Like that's healthy as a discourse.
Yeah, I think there's a huge narrative happening now. I think I've seen you talk about this as well, where it feels like everything has to be in service of revenue. And everything needs to be this full funnel multi-touch attribution. And we've been told for so long that, oh, it's only because the tech isn't good enough that we can't do true multi-touch attribution. But the reality is there's so many things that are also dark, meaning there's this whole concept of dark social. I can tell you for a fact, I get on calls with people who come inbound and request a demo. No idea where they came from. I asked them on a call, hey, how'd you hear about us? And they're like, oh, I saw your post on this on LinkedIn. I'm like, cool. You have never once liked something of
Oh
mine,
yeah.
commented on something. Like there's zero way to do real attribution there. And so I think it's a little bit of a fool's errand to try to say, we're going to have this like beautiful picture of every single touch, and that's going to be the end game. That's not the end game.
Well, the other problem is that because people feel like we need to measure impact, and they're like, all right, we'll concede we can't measure impact, especially for social. It's really hard. We can't measure impact. Maybe there's self-reported attribution, but if you're doing, it's easier when you don't have a lot of emotions. If it's like, hey, we have a podcast and webinar and we post on LinkedIn, like you can kind of tell it's going to be one of those things, right? It's really simple. Put self-reported attribution in there, which is just as flawed. Like human memory is flawed at best, even if they try to give an honest answer. A lot of times I also argue that like people say what they think people want to hear in self-reported attribution. You know what I mean? Like if I was filling out your thing, it's like, oh, I love Elaine. I've been following Elaine. And it's like, but is that the thing? Or are you just saying that? You know what I mean? Like, especially if you have like popular, famous founder, like people put stuff flattering in there because they want to feel like a part of that. Um, but I see the same thing in like my self-reported attribution. Like, and I don't fuss about it too much. To your point, like most of the people who fill out my forms, I have never heard of them. I am so when somebody fills out my form and I already know their name and I recognize it in my inbox, I'm like, oh, and I reply right away. I reply to everybody right away, but like, we have some context. It's almost never true, but half of my pipeline comes from LinkedIn and the other 50% comes from referrals, communities I'm in, things like that. They saw me in some sort of like something like this. I just don't
Because
stress it
in
too much.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually funny for us. We have self-reported attribution. After somebody fills out a form, they get a little screen asking, where'd you hear about us? And we give them 10 options. I mean, it's granular, like a podcast, a LinkedIn post, like very specific. Half the people pick other. And we're like, what is other? Like, where else could other be? Not word of mouth, not email, not, like we have no idea. So
I think that's one of the good uses for AI, especially if you're high volume, leaving it open field and that like people put web. No shit. Like we're on the
you
internet.
filled out a
Yes.
form.
You didn't see my ad in Time magazine? Like what yes, web. That's all we do is on the internet. But like that's to your point, like you can also ask a secondary question, like, hey, you put web on there. Like what do you think was like the most impactful thing that made you want to reach out? And then they'll tell you a little more candidly. But I think all those are just signals. And we're really just looking at like the overall word cloud map, trying to figure out like, all right, what's working for us? What might we double down on if that's even a thing? Like sometimes we just mistake some of these investments. And to your point, like a lot of investments are really flawed. When I was in-house, I reached out to the person running pay-per-click marketing and was like, hey, I'm doing organic SEO. I want to see what's working on paid. Maybe we can make some new organic pages and win there too. Elaine, it was 99% branded. Like we were paying a full-time employee to run branded search campaigns, which was just yeeting money into the sun and stealing all of my organic traffic, which caveat shouldn't have even been my organic traffic because it's branded. Like it's all the other stuff we're doing. Right. So things like that, like the incentives are all wrong, especially in-house, especially agency. It's just the goal is to take as much credit as possible and defend our jobs.
You hit on a point that is very top of mind in that for some reason, marketing has become so fractured in that each person owns a channel typically. And that channel is not only isolated from a tools and data perspective, but even from a team perspective, meaning you guys hadn't before you went over there and were like, hey, let me see what I can learn from you on the paid side. That wasn't even a conversation or a feedback loop that was happening. And
Yep.
I feel like people keep saying, oh, we want to do integrated stuff. We want to do integrated marketing, but nobody's actually doing that. And I feel like that's become even worse and worse as tool proliferation has gotten also worse.
It's also easier when it's small. Like I think when you get to like 50 or 60 marketers in an organization, like that gets it's hard to figure out that is. But I mean, that's the job of managers and executives is like like marketing orchestration, like figuring out how do all these tools come together? How do we cross pollinate information and conversations? And a lot of times it's just like smushing kids together. Like, I have 4 kids, so it's like apologize, give each other a hug. And you're like, that's what I feel like happens with it. Sorry to like use a weird analogy, but like that's what happens in marketing orgs. They're like, you and you talk. And they just put a 30-minute meeting on your calendar. And it's like, we're not actually working on a thing together. I will say I have seen this happen. Early days of G2 here in Chicago, like when they sucked up all the marketing talent that existed for like 3 or 4 years and hired everybody, they had a group of people that have gone on to be some of the best marketers that I've seen in the world. And there's probably like 10 or 15 of them, but they just got all these young, hungry, like 20-year-olds. They smushed them together. But all these kids like were like, this is summer camp. Like, we just love working, but our work peers are our friends, and they worked a ton, and they got millions and millions of people to their website. Like, they did a great job. And that is very rare, though, that you can just smush people together and magic happens.
Yeah, I think that is, and to your point, it gets harder as the teams get bigger. And also, when you have a bunch of 20-year-olds or 25-year-olds, it's a little bit easier because their peers, they also don't have all the other life stuff that just tends to happen. And what I've seen too is when you start having teams with multiple generations, you just have miscommunication a lot.
And expectations are all over the place. People are like, I have 4 boys, and I have rescheduled. I rescheduled the meeting earlier today because it was snowy out, and the older boys had a late start, and that meant that my youngest, who goes to school right across the street from my office at this really cool Montessori school, like, we were late bringing him there, and then this other thing happened, and it's like, I have very different life. Or people are just like, hey, let's grab dinner. Absolutely
Yeah.
not. I will never grab dinner with you. It is very rare and very special if I'm going to grab dinner with you. I'm flattered to be invited. I'm not trying to cool guy anybody, but I like my kids more than I like you. Like, I really do. Hopefully it's not a controversial take that I like my kids more than I like pretty much everybody other than my wife. So, like, I'm going to choose them. I coach all their sports. I do everything I can with them. It's really important to me to be a huge part of their lives. So I will always choose that. I have a hard stop at 5:00. It is very rare that I'm going to be like, I'm not doing this with my kids that I've promised them I'll do because a blog is due. I don't care. Is that
And that's
weird?
also
I don't
nice.
feel like that's a hot take.
Not at all. I have 2 kids and same story. It's like, they come first and you have to figure out life around it. It's also nice when you're doing your own thing, right? You now have the flexibility of saying, no, thank you. Right. I think, when you're at a larger organization, it's a little bit harder for some people. But did you have kind of like a F it moment where you're like, I'm done working for people?
I want to hold on. If I can caveat what I was just saying, I don't want to shame anybody. Like, I don't want to. You shouldn't be ashamed if you like work. I love work. I love this stuff. If I didn't have a family, I would probably be a absolute psychopath and just working like 19 hours a day because I love this stuff.
Same.
It is fun for me. I enjoy it. So in also, like, having kids isn't for everybody. I want to caveat that too. Like, I'm 40. If you're 40 and don't have kids because of that's your path in life, like, cool. Like, you also don't have to work. The expectation is not that only kids allows you to make that decision. It's still your life. That said, yeah, I don't know if it was a like, fuck it, I'm done moment, but I absolutely had a moment where I knew that I should be done. And it wasn't, let me back up. I kept moving the goalposts forever. I was like, Elaine, I had a conversation with my wife, and I was like, when Growth Sprints makes $500,000 in 1 year, I can quit my job. And she's like, Brendan, they pay you $97,000 at that company. Why do you need to make 500 to make up 97? And I'm like, I don't know, because I'm scared. She's like, you can quit now. And that was the moment for me when my wife was like, you can quit now. And what happened was the 2 preceding events was I had scheduled time off to take 2 vacations, one at the beginning of April, so right at the start of our Q2, and then one a couple weeks later to go on a different part of our family was also going on a vacation, so we were going with them. The one at the end of April happened, or the end of March happened, beginning of April. Right at the end of Q1, I left, and I was like, good, I've got everything done. And when I left, everything exploded, and we had this like crabs in a I can't, because I didn't get Brendan's thing, and Brendan owes me this, and Brendan didn't do that. But it was a lot of this, a lot of culture of like, I'm blocked. Nobody wanted to work. If I'm not there, if I have to work 80 hours to take 40 hours off, if I have to work get 2 weeks of work done to take a week off, I'm not actually taking time off.
Yeah.
This PTO is bullshit. If I have to just get all your work done ahead of time, that's not how time off works. Because if I could get it all done ahead of time, I shouldn't have to take PTO the next week. I just don't have anything to do. I can just do whatever I want. Like,
Exactly.
that's not actually PTO. PTO means somebody covers for you. And then when they take PTO, I cover for them. That's how tech companies, that's how vacation works. You cover for each other, not you do all of your work early. Anyways, rant over. But it was crabs in a bucket. Nobody wanted to work. So I got back and everybody, or they were hitting me up all vacation. I'm like, guys, all I brought was my phone. I can't access all the internal tools on my phone. Like, I didn't bring a laptop to Florida with me. Like, what do you want? And they were all mad when I got back. Okay, cool. I go on my next vacation, and a month later, my boss is like, no. What do you mean no? He's like, I didn't approve it. I go, I requested this stuff in December. You had 4 months to approve it or not approve it. Well, I never approved it. Cool. You had 30 days. He's like, you can't go. Okay, cool. I'm taking the time off for my mental health. It's in our core values as a company that we support mental health. You're welcome to write me up, report me, and I'm going to do the same. If you're going to do that, then I'm going to here's all these things. He didn't like that. Halfway through the vacation, he sends me a Slack message. Says, I'm locking you out of all the systems. First of all, that's like I want you to work. I'm locking you out. He's like, you have abandoned your job, all this bullshit. And I was like, so I just hit up our VP of marketing, Jenny, and I was like, hey, this guy's psycho. I don't know what's going on, but he's pulling all this shenanigans. Can I talk to you when I get back? And she's like, yeah, that's nuts. Like, talk to me when you get back. And it was on that ride home that I was like, this is, I'd also started having severe health problems and burnout. I ended up getting a blood clot in my leg, and the doctors were like, we don't know why that happened. You could have died, probably due to stress. You probably need to relax a little bit. And I'm already a pretty high strung, hyper person most of the time. I'm very extroverted. So they're like, you need to chill out. All this stuff was kind of compounding at the time. And I was like, what am I doing? And that was a moment we were sitting in my minivan driving home. We were just outside of Nashville, coming back up to Chicago. And my wife was like, you can put in your 2 weeks. So I got back, talked to my boss's boss. The next Monday, I put in my 2 weeks. Was just like, all right, cool. And then nothing changed, Elaine. The next, after the 2 weeks were up, I just had less meetings. Everything, there was I already had double my salary in consulting work outside of work. I don't know. I just kind of stopped. You know what I mean? I just closed the calendar. I don't have that in-house calendar anymore. Okay.
It's fascinating on the in-house versus external as a consultant. I keep hearing this over and over, and it makes total sense, but it's also illogical. When you're in-house, people think they can always ask more of you, your boss, demanding that you not take vacation and do 80 hours of work ahead of time and all this stuff. They don't respect people as much. They're always just kind of saying it's not good enough. Then you go as an external consultant. You're the expert. They'll pay you more. They'll listen to you. They'll respect you. It's just, you could be doing the same thing or saying the same thing. It's just perceived very differently.
It absolutely is. In that situation where it was I couldn't make changes to any web pages without 20 meetings and 50 decks. And, we were an email marketing company with no newsletter. And I'm like, I want to start a newsletter. And they're like, cool, you got to have a design. You got a product marketing's going to have input, start a meeting with them, meeting cadence with them. Design's going to want to design the emails, and I'll immediately no, straight to jail. I don't want to do that. I don't want let me cook, let me do something. Anything. I just want to have impact, and I want to be proud of our work. And I think that's what all of us want as marketers. We want to have impact, and we want to be proud of what we do. And even if you're having a ton of impact, but you think the stuff's really if you were to use your AI example, if you're Brendan, spin up 20,000 Gen AI pages, and then by some, I don't think this would ever happen, but by some miracle it worked. But I was I don't want to show anybody any of the pages. That's not good. I don't care about the impact if I'm embarrassed about the work. And I also, even if I love what I'm making, but it's not having impact, I'm not thrilled with that either. But you got to let people do both of those things. You have to let them figure out what they like, what they're proud of, and also push them to have impact.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I'm really curious about too, you're going to see now because of your work in these sprints, you get to see a lot of companies and internally how they're operating, what they're doing. What do you see as the most common mistakes those growth stage companies are making when it comes to content and growth?
So I think the biggest one is the checkbox marketing piece. We're doing one podcast a week, 2 blogs per week, 1 webinar per month. They're just checking the list of output, right? And they're assuming there's impact related to that. So that's on one thing. Like we have a very strict calendar, content calendar, checkbox marketing. The other end of the spectrum is like random acts of marketing. Like we're just random ass partner webinars, and we publish this blog and we fired out this email, and everybody posts on social today. We're freaking out. We got to promo this thing, and that it's just all over. I think in the middle is where we want to be, right? Where we're doing like really thoughtful work and we have like systems in place to create feedback loops with customers and other teams. Like there's probably a really, and this is something I do with a lot of clients, is like help figure out, it's almost like a content ops. I hate naming weird functions, but it's like what is the operating system for content at this company? Channel agnostic. I don't care how we distribute it. I don't care. Like we'll figure those things out, but like, what is this system? But the biggest things that people are struggling with is usually they're at one end of the spectrum, and helping them come out of that, which usually means habit changes, is hard. Like it's hard to be like, what if you didn't publish a blog this week? What if you didn't publish a blog for 2 months? Would anything happen? Like, what if we, and that's usually like downside risk. What I've pushed some clients to do in the past, I'm like, can you double that? Double it, double your output, send twice as many emails, let's do twice as many webinars, let's do twice as many one thing, and see if anything changes. Sometimes it doesn't. And you're like, cool, that was upside risk. Like, you know, if you turned it off, imagine, don't send emails for a month. People would be like, oh shit, like what if the numbers go way down? Like we can't afford that. Cool, send twice as many, upside risk, see if anything moves. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. We don't know, but we should try some things. And it usually proves to people like you can kind of throw out some of your content calendar.
That's actually really smart to avoid but what if it dries up our funnel? You actually go on the other side. That's actually a really smart tactic. I'm going to steal that one. I like that. Thank you.
I stole it from the founder, Pranav, the founder of Paramark. He said it in a
love it. That's great.
conference, and that was one of those moments. What I love is also like treating our audience. This is like my content take, treating your audience with respect. Like there is definitely a place for like explain it like I'm 5, but I like giving people like bigger ideas and then letting them fill in their own details. Don't be like, here's 5 takeaways. No. But like, here's 5 questions you should ask yourself. Right. And then you'll fill in your own stuff. Like I came back from that conference and I was like, oh my God, let me look at my LinkedIn impressions and my lead flow. Most people would be like, those don't have anything to do with each other. And I was like, those curves are pretty similar, which is insane to me. Like they're delayed, but it's almost like a mirror when I change the, whatever it is, the y-axis. And then I started doing other things. Like, what about comments? What about how often I post? Could I post twice as much on LinkedIn? I did that for a month. Nothing happened. Didn't need to post twice as much on LinkedIn. Cool. As long as I'm consistent, we're good. Stuff like that, like running those types of experiments. What's also cool is like if you market to marketers, like I do, every experiment is also content and helpful. Like I'm talking about it now. Like the marketing is the marketing about the marketing, a little snake eating its own tail. But I think that's also like a missed opportunity. Like experimenting, even if you sell to people in IT, what kind of IT experiments could we do with our own product? And then we report out like, hey, we tried this, didn't work, or we tried this, it did work. Like just doing more of that sort of stuff. That's super fun for content. And it's also like really fun for your team.
Yeah, agreed. And also, you kind of mentioned really almost introspectively looking at, okay, like how can we go and use what we have today to be a little bit more creative and do experiments that are in service of the audience, which I think sometimes people, to your point of checkbox, sometimes people do it in service of them, not in service of their audience. So what would be the best experience for your customers, for your prospects? How do we go and test things around that? Versus so often what I see is people are like, we need to do all of these things and we need to promote this feature and we need to like do a webinar on this, whatever. Does your audience care? Is that helping them? Is it teaching them something?
Yep, absolutely. You know, I work with a company called Sendoso, and like their biggest, like their SVP of marketing, Casey Jenkins, gets asked questions all the time by all of her peers who are the like IICP that they sell to, like marketing leaders. And she gets asked all the time, like 3 or 4 specific questions. And I'm like, stop the presses. This is the content strategy. The stuff they're asking you about is what they need to know. And yes, like the product lends itself to all of these things because you're using the product to solve a lot of this stuff. Just waterfall these things. Like just write about what you're doing. Like you already know what you're being asked. And if you're in a company right now where like nobody's asking you stuff or you don't have a forcing function, like Copy AI does a really good job of like eating their own caviar. They take all their sales calls from Gong, pipe it through the product, it puts it in Slack for them, and they get breakdowns of every single sales call across the company. Everybody can look at this stuff. What are the pain points? What do they suggest? Like all this like really granular breakdown. Now everybody in the company is effectively on every single sales call. I don't know why everybody doesn't do that. Everybody should be on every single sales call. Everybody should be on every single support call. Use generative AI should not be used to make content. It should be used to aggregate like information and be a co-pilot. That's the real strength for
Insights.
marketers, I think.
Yeah, insights for sure. I agree. And one last question. I know I want to respect your time. What if you have
I'll
one that's
talk all
public?
day about this stuff.
Amazing. Me too. We have to do round two, by the way. I have so
Yeah,
many other
fair.
questions we didn't even get to. Question for you though. So, do you have a single example? It could either be for your own stuff that you're working on or for a client that's public of a campaign or a thing you guys did that you're most proud of. That was like the thing you're like, oh my God, this is like gold standard A plus.
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm trying to, if it was just you and me talking, we could do the friend DA and I can be like, listen to this
Yes.
without naming the company. I'm trying to think of the best way to talk about this. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I'll give you like an uncommon one. Can I give you two? I know we're at
Please.
time, but like two.
No, that'd be
So
great.
one is really silly. It was when I was in-house at an agency. One of our clients was Allstate Insurance, and somebody on my team, I don't know the rules about shouting people out. I want to say his name, but like, he's amazing. He works, I think, for CrowdStrike now. His company got acquired by CrowdStrike, and he's there, and he's brilliant. And he was like, hey, what if we just do internal links on the website? Every time they say car insurance, connect it to the car insurance page. Feels like a best practice. It's like a technical SEO type of thing. And we were like, cool, cool, cool. Next week, Google was like, you rank number one for car insurance now. And that is held for like
Wow.
5 years. And that's worth like hundreds of millions of dollars to them. And I was like, hold on. You're telling me I just find the phrase that we want it to rank for, connect it. Because, a lot of internal links are like, click here or some random ass
Yeah.
half sentence or something. But it's also good for users because I know when I'm clicking on it, I'm going to get information about that exact thing. But find all the keywords on the site. Like if you have a page that you want it to rank for email marketing, find every time you say email marketing on the website, link it to that page. So I started doing that with clients when I went in-house at Active Campaign. That was like what I did for the first 2 weeks. I just set like hundreds, thousands of internal links. And the next month we went from like 200,000 visitors to the blog to 240,000. I was like, this really works. And now I've started doing it with clients and we see like huge turnarounds, like that worked with Sendoso, that's worked with like tons of clients. Ahrefs has a tool for it if you want to cheat. You don't need to hire me. You can just get a subscription to Ahrefs, run the site audit. There's an internal links opportunities. It is the most powerful part of their tool. It's buried in there. Do that. If you're in-house, pay for Ahrefs for 1 month, run it, right? That's a silly thing that is a best practice. And I'm big on pushing back against best practices because most of them don't work. They're just us checking boxes. So that's like a good example of one that I think is like maybe not super common.
Yeah.
I think the other one that I think is really interesting, I am big on, this is maybe interesting for everybody because I said earlier, like, I don't think generative AI should be for content. I had a client that is an AI company and in like a really interesting space that I didn't even know existed as like a human on the earth. They serve a really unique function in a really unique audience in like the medical space. And they're an AI company and they were like, we've been using Claude to write all these blogs and they are doing better than the human written ones. I was like, I don't believe you. You're wrong. And they were like, no, 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 for real. And I started looking. This is one of the other cool things of like doing client work is I get to see a ton of stuff. Sometimes I learn something new and like, hopefully that's good. If I'm choosing my clients right, that should happen. And then I can take that to all my other clients. And I looked at what they were doing and how they were training it and how they like all the information they had compiled. And I was like, these aren't bad. Like it's, for me, I push back a lot on like a quality debate versus a tactics debate. Like this tactic is good or bad. Sometimes it's not good or bad. It's just, is the quality good or bad? Most
Mhm.
generative AI content, to what you said earlier, sucks. Like they think they can just be like, write me 12 social posts about cybersecurity. And they're like, we're going to post these. Don't, don't do that. But if you're like, hey, we're going to upload all of these things and we're going to upload source material and interviews with subject matter experts and all these like blah, blah, blah. And we're going to figure out how to prompt really well. I've seen people doing this really well. The thing is, here's the thing. They're not telling anybody because it's a competitive advantage. If they talk about it, the same reason I'm not mentioning who they are is because in their space, like if they're like, wait, this works in our space, all their competitors do it. Just like remember back in the day when Backlinko was like, hey, do backlink outreach for SEO. Just email people and ask for a backlink and they'll give you one. And we were like, no way. So we all started doing it. And then the effectiveness of it went down. Just like how we're in this era, I think Operator calls this like the great ignore with outbound. Outbound is louder and noisier and more ignorable than ever. It's hard to break through that, right? The more common tactics are. So I do think you can do this stuff. It's just hard and it's hard to do well. But that's like crushing for them. And I'm like super proud of it because they took normally like clients take a long time to execute my content strategy. And we're on like week 6. And they're like, we know you fulfilled all your obligations, but we've already executed on them. Can you give us more? And I'm like, I want to win. Sure. Great. I'm happy to do twice as much work because it's twice as much results. And I want more up into the right graphs to use to share on LinkedIn, stuff like that.
Those are both
Sorry to
awesome
be vague.
examples.
I was just like,
No,
I have to be a little cagey about certain things.
no, and that one in particular is a newer thing, meaning like the internal linking one is something that is, I didn't even think of it, but when you said it, I'm like, that's so obvious. It makes so much sense, but I never thought of it. This one I
Yep.
think is a little bit more, it's both strategic, but it also involves some level of knowledge of how to do it well. It's not like, oh, A plus B equals, whatever. It's like you have to actually be thoughtful about how you do it. To your point around quality needs to be there. Otherwise, it's
Yeah.
just
And
not going to
most of the
perform.
advice on LinkedIn is like, use Claude, question mark, question mark, question mark, profit. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
what's the in between? Like, that in between part is where the magic happens.
Well, the other funny thing too is it's fascinating because you get to see a lot of these internal teams and how they're doing content and how they're running campaigns. I'm seeing a ton of people prompting live. Like I get to see people and how they interact with AI. And one thing that is so fascinating, and part of this is a mistake of our industry of teaching people that it's black magic, it can do anything. People legitimately think it can read their mind. And they think that they could just give it something as vague as write some blog posts or social posts on cybersecurity, and it's going to know exactly what they meant and what their
Mm-hmm.
product does and all this stuff. And it's just fascinating. It can't read your mind. And I
No,
think the
and
people
sometimes
who
it can't
figured
even
out
read the stuff, and it says it with so much confidence. I asked Claude to do something for me the other day to analyze some stuff, and I was like, "Hey, can you put this in my tone of voice? Here's all the annual reviews I've written for the last." I do an annual review every year. It's just like cathartic. I publish it. I don't really promote it. But I was just like, "Can you read this and get my tone of voice?" And it's like, and then I want you to write this analysis. And in the middle of it, it was like, and then I talked to Megan, and I'm like, I replied to Claude. I go, "Who the fuck is Megan?" They're like, "Oh, sorry, your wife's name is Liz." Yeah. Like what? Like, and if you take it as like copy and paste that over, like,
yeah,
does he not
yeah,
know his wife's name? Like, what's going on? Like, you have to be mindful of these things. It is still so confidently wrong all the time that, like, even with good training, like, you have to be really mindful of this stuff. And that's where it helps to have that, like, to actually have subject matter expertise and be like, all right, cool. Like, this is a good D plus C minus draft, but I don't have to stare at a blank page anymore.
yeah, I agree. Last final question for you right now, and then I do at some point want to do a part two because I got a lot more stuff. If you're focused now on certain things, but of the projects you have in the back burner, what's the one you're most excited to do at some point next?
So I think I index really well like this. Like, I was a high school teacher for 10 years in Gary, Indiana, and on the south side of Chicago. And the thing with teaching high school is you got to be like on your shit all the time. Like, they will eat your lunch if you show weakness. If they smell blood in the water, it is over. And you have to be the show, like, ready to go every single day, and you end up becoming like a stand-up comedian. You figure out like where the laughs are and where the jokes are and stuff. Like there would be things where like I had a kid that was in first period get switched to last period. So he just shows up to the last period class. He's already had my class. He's like, I don't know, guidance counselor just said come again. And I'm like, all right, sitting here. And I start doing my thing. And he's like, say that joke. Hufford, say that joke you're going to say. And I'm like, they know, like they get it. So anyways, like I index well like this because I had 10 years of effectively stand-up comedy. I had to be an educator and an entertainer. Turns out that's really, really good for marketing. But I don't do any of this. I don't do my own webinars. I don't do my own podcast. Kind of good with where my business is at, just like posting on LinkedIn. But I have like multiple things I want to experiment with. I want to have a podcast. I've got some ideas. I've joked around with a couple people about like maybe starting one with certain people that are my, just in my friend group. I've also wanted to do more live events. Like I have All In. You mentioned my community earlier. It's a free community. And I think free communities often get bogged down with like just a lot of, especially for marketers, just a lot of like self-promotion and bullshit. But I pay somebody to help me with it. Lindsay Adams, who was formerly at FormStack. She's amazing. She helps run it. She also helps write my newsletter. She's brilliant and amazing. But I invest in a lot in that, and it doesn't make me any money. And I also have no connection to those people hiring me. It's not like anybody hires me and they're like, I've been in your community 0 times. Never happens. I just want a place to hang out with my friends. Yeah. So I made one. And like, I want that. I'm super competitive. Like I watch like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan stuff. And I'm like, oh, I have that same sickness. Like that's in me too. I want it to be better than all the paid communities out there. I don't know when we do that, but I want that. I want it to be good. I want it to be like the best and still be free. So I don't know. I've got a lot of it to bring this full circle. I have a lot of ideas. The thing I'm most excited about is either having some sort of like face-to-face media, or just doing more video. Like I still think vertical video is like super interesting. It's got a lot of downsides, but as a consumer of too much of it, I want to play there too. I want to experiment. I want to find out like if this does anything for me.
Amazing. Well, I definitely have to join All In, and I'm excited to continue following along with your journey. Also, I grew up in Chicago, so I'll let you know next time I'm there.
Please do. Caveat. I live in Northwest Indiana, so not Chicago, but closer to Chicago than everybody who claims Chicago, but they live in Naperville. It's like, shut up. You don't live in, I live closer to the city than you. I'm just in the, you know what I mean? It's like people that live in like New Jersey, but they say they're from Philly because like it's the same. It's just over the border. Like nobody knows.
My parents are legitimately in Lincoln Park, so Chicago.
Okay,
so
you are actual. Okay, cool. Don't judge me for claiming Chicago. It's just easy. You know what I mean? You're like, I live in Indiana, and people are like, that's somewhere in the Midwest.
Yeah. It's always funny too, because in San Francisco, when I meet somebody who says they're from Chicago, they're usually from the northern suburbs or somewhere like, Naperville.
Yeah, like you basically live in Wisconsin. Like, what are you doing?
Very true.
You're 55 minutes from the city.
Yeah, this is accurate.
We got a little Midwest rants at the end. Cool.
Exactly. Well, Brendan, you're awesome. I'm excited to continue this. Keep on keeping on, and thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Thanks everybody who's watching too. Appreciate you.
Bye.